Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Elm Grove Women's Club. I'm Janet Day, the current club president, and we are pleased to host this informational event for village residents. Before we begin, I invite you to look around at this historic building and imagine all its possibilities. For example, last month we transformed this space into an indoor bluegrass festival with a bluegrass band, picnic tables, barbecue, and a whiskey tasting. It was much fun. In December, we had holiday gatherings. In November, this space welcomed over 1,000 guests for our annual Christmas in the Grove. Last October, our space was a jazz nightclub. Upcoming events include a continuation of our Music in the Grove series with a Celtic band, Paddy Grass, and the Trinity Irish Dancers from our Elm Grove studios on Friday, March 15th. This is a family-friendly event close to home. Live music, food, drinks, dancing, bring the whole gang for a fun-filled Irish celebration. In April, we host our Art Scholarship Competition. Our Music in the Grove series continues with Brookfield native singer-songwriter Nora Collins on April 18th, and our annual Shake the Chandelier Ball on April 20th. Our website, egwc.org, has all the information about these events and more. And we have an informational table right here in the corner with our Director of Membership, Ellen Labush. She will answer any questions about membership to the Women's Club and about these upcoming events. So please keep us in mind for your next event. The building is available for rent, plenty of parking, and close to home. Tonight, we welcome Village Trustee John Schindler to tell us all about the Daylighting the Creek Project. I have so many questions. We are excited to see what our village center might look like. John, so I will turn the microphone over to you, and again, welcome to you all.
Thank you, Janet. Well, I'm very happy to see so many people turn out tonight, especially with the storms coming. So, before I get started, I have a couple of announcements. First, if you haven't already, I encourage you to sign up for the village newsletter. Village staff has done a tremendous job of putting this together. It only comes out once a month. You won't be flooded in your inbox, but it'll keep you informed of all the things that are happening in village government and the projects we're working on. You can either go on the website to sign up, or we have some QR codes that you can click your phone on, and that'll get you all set up. Second, I didn't come alone tonight. With me tonight is Village Manager Tom Harrigan. And our Zoning and Planning Administrator, Catherine Gale. There we go. Okay. The three of us will be sticking around afterwards because staff has brought some extra materials for you to look at, and we'll be here to answer any questions afterwards. So, there's three main things I want to talk about tonight. First, I'll tell you a little bit about my background so you know why I'm even qualified to be up here talking to you about this. Then I want to go over the science of how a stream actually works in a landscape and how the physical, chemical, and biological interactions with groundwater impact the ecosystem. Next, we'll discuss the village-wide flood control program and how the proposed daylighting project encompasses all of these elements. So I grew up just about a block from here on Florence Drive. So this building has been a fixture for most of my life, so I'm really glad to be here. After high school, I went to the University of Wisconsin and at Madison. And while I was still at university, I was hired by the U.S. Geological Survey, specifically the Water Resources Division. And the project I was assigned to was the Water, Energy, and Biogeochemical Budget Program. And what that does is we were researching how water, nutrients, and energy are stored and moved through a watershed. I then had the great fortune to be assigned to a station in northern Wisconsin at Trout Lake. We share a lab up there with the University of Wisconsin. They have a lake studies lab, and that program is part of a much broader program called long-term ecological research. LTER, as it's known, is a great idea. What happened prior to this was a scientist would go out and take samples and do research on like a lake or a stream. They'd analyze their data, they'd publish their results, then they come back 30 years later, and everything's changed. And they had no idea how it got from one point to another. So this idea was that we would set up different stations in different biomes around the world, and we'd constantly monitor different parameters. We would have some instruments taking readings all the time. We would have crews that would go out and sample the water column top to bottom for chemical parameters, for zooplankton, for phytoplankton. We would sample the fish in the lake to see how those populations are changing. We would scuba dive and find out what plants are at the bottom of every lake. Now there are 7 lakes in this study in the North Temperate Lakes Project where I was up by Minocqua. My job was researching the forested streams that surrounded these lakes. And because I had the background in stream studies, I was asked to join an expedition to Antarctica, a 4-month expedition. And we were issued these parkas. We didn't just happen to shop at the same store. So we are standing on top of the Canada Glacier, and here's another picture of it. To give you a sense of scale, these ice cliffs here are about 200 or 300 feet tall. So we're about 5 miles away from the glacier. And if I could describe Antarctica, it's a whole continent, and it's covered by a 2-mile thick ice sheet. But through the center of the continent, there's a mountain range called the Trans-Antarctic Mountains, and they stick up through the ice. And there's some valleys in these mountains where the ice can't get into, except for some lower passes where the ice can ooze through. Comes about halfway down the valley, and in the summertime, because they're by the pole, so you get 4 months of sunlight, these glaciers start to melt. And where that water goes is into streams that come down, and they go into these permanently ice-covered lakes. These lakes have 30 feet of ice year-round. But around the edges, these moats form that are melted. So what we were doing was studying these streams and how they interact with geology. Well, why the heck would you go all the way down there to study a stream? Well, the reason for that is this is the most pure water on Earth. There's pretty much no pollution down there because you have a circumpolar wind pattern and current, so really pollution doesn't get down there. And also the melt comes from ice that fell as snow when Jesus walked the planet. So there are no plants, no animals, no fish in the middle of the continent. So this water is only interacting with the soil and the microbial community. So what we can do is then get a baseline of how the stream works, take that and apply it up here, something like Underwood Creek. Now, if you think about Underwood Creek at all, you might think it's just a little drainage ditch that goes through the village. It's actually much more than that. It's 12 miles long. It starts here. This is Pilgrim Park. Must have had too much caffeine today, I'm shaking. And flows up into Brookfield before it comes back down into Elm Grove. And it cuts through the center of the village. It drains all the surface water in Elm Grove and a good portion of Brookfield. It curves around and goes into Wauwatosa and joins the Menominee River by the Hanson Golf Course. It drains 18 square miles. It is a headwater stream on the subcontinental divide. So this little bit of red you see here, that water's going to go west to the Mississippi all this water here is going to go east. It's going to go into Lake Michigan and eventually out to the Atlantic. So kind of a cool fact is the water you see flowing through the village is going to go over Niagara Falls. Now, when I think of a headwater stream, I think of fly fishing in Montana. But before we put in a lot of the infrastructure here, like the culvert, northern pike used to swim all the way up and spawn in Brookfield. And once we remove this, they'll be able to do so again. So here you can see the Menominee River watershed. Here's Elm Grove, that little blue square right there. So you can see anything we do affects everybody upstream and downstream. So regional cooperation is obviously needed. So why is there water always in the stream? We might get a dry spell and go months without rain, and yet there's still water there. It's because it's basically the surface expression of the groundwater. Groundwater flows into the stream, and at some points in the stream it can flow from the stream into the groundwater. So what's an aquifer? An aquifer is just a layer of soil that holds water and allows water to flow through it. And what drives groundwater flow is simply gravity and pressure. So you get precipitation, rain that falls, it fills up the aquifer, and then it starts flowing by pressure and gravity towards a regional outlet like a stream or a lake. Now you can see these little wells here. We don't get our drinking water from a surface aquifer. And the reason for that is you can see by this picture, there's all kinds of stuff that might be going in there that you might not want coming out of your tap, like fertilizers, pesticides, motor oil, road salt. So we go to the deeper aquifers. And the deeper aquifers are surface aquifers somewhere else, but further away. And when the water travels through the aquifers, it is cleansed of all the bacteria and harmful substances, but it takes a while to do that. The water that we drink from our wells here in Elm Grove fell as precipitation near Oconomowoc. So when you put a well into the water table or into an aquifer, it starts to draw down the water. And if you pump enough, you can actually reverse the flow of the aquifer and dry up streams, which has happened in central Wisconsin. Now here you see a high capacity well. What happens when you start pumping is you create this what's called a cone of depression, and that cone propagates outward, and if your neighbor's well has a screen that's higher than yours, you might make your neighbor's well go dry. So that's one of the reasons we had to get Lake Michigan water for the Caroline Heights project. 247 apartments, 21 homes. If they were all pumping water, a lot of the residences over there would have their wells run dry. So this is just a graph of water levels in the groundwater in Wisconsin. It's kind of counterintuitive. You see it at the highest in the winter. And as it drops down, it's discharging out into streams and lakes. And then you get that bump up right here in the springtime with snowmelt. But it continues downward. And why do you think that is? It's because evapotranspiration. A good-sized oak tree can pump out 100 liters a day of water. And then as that evapotranspiration shuts down, the water levels start rising again. Okay, so it's not just a drainage pipe. People used to look at rivers that way. I mean, there were warehouses down on the Milwaukee River you could have bought for $1 in the 1980s that are worth millions today. Water draws people, and that's what they found out. Everyone wants to be on the river, near the river. So now we realize that this is really something important. So streams started to be studied more intensely. Now, there's this biologically active zone right below the stream bed called the hyporheic zone. It was identified as far back as 1959, but not a lot of thought was given to it because it didn't seem to have much effect on the stream, they thought. But as you can see, water flows from the groundwater through the hyporheic zone and from the stream into the groundwater. And also, as water is flowing downstream, it's going in and out of the hyporheic zone, and that cools the water in the summer and warms the water in the winter, which moderates the temperature to sustain life. It also picks up a lot of nutrients as it goes in there and brings those nutrients to the water for the surface ecosystem. It also removes lots of pollution. There's billions and billions of bacteria that are on the sediment granules, and they actually act like little factories to remove pollution. So you can ignore the whole part on the right here. I just want to show you this hyporheic flow path here. And what that illustrates is a stream is part of the landscape. It's not just a pipe. So what do you think happens when we do this? You get an ecological dead zone and you get flooding. So some of you might know who Aldo Leopold is. He's considered the father of wildlife ecology. What he's postulating here is a stream gets its energy from the sun. It goes to the plants, which are eaten by insects, and they're eaten by fish. Well, it turns out that Aldo was only half right. This is from a paper I published in a scientific journal. And what you're looking at, these sample points are depths below the stream. The uppermost point is the stream water. The next 3 points are 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches below, and then 2 feet below. And then the last one down here is 6. So if you think of this, top one, stream water, 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches, 2 feet, 6 feet. So why didn't anybody look at the hyporheic zone? If you look at the 2-foot mark here, whoop, go back. Look at the 2-foot mark here. It's almost identical to the stream water. So they would go pound down a pipe at 2 feet, sample of water, and say, well, nothing to see here. It's the exact same water that's in the stream. They completely missed all the activity going on above it. And this activity has a lot to do with the ecosystem in the stream. You can see a lot of carbon dioxide and methane are being generated. Carbon dioxide is from respiration of aerobic organisms. CH4 is what anaerobic microbes respire. So there's all kinds of different metabolism going on right below the surface. Now the big important thing that got us in the textbooks is that right up there, this molecular weight. The University of Berkeley came up with a technique where you could shoot a light beam through your sample and determine the molecular weight of your dissolved organic carbon. And the reason that's important is microbes love to eat the low molecular weight stuff. It's primo food for them. The heavier stuff they can't eat. So what this shows is this is bringing energy up into the stream from below. Not just above, it's both. So you can see the triangle up here. That's what Aldo Leopold was talking about. But they completely missed the bacteria and the microbial food web beneath the surface. So, you got all this happening. What happens again when you do this? You get nothing. You get nothing from above, nothing from below. This is the view. We're standing like in front of Zisters looking south underneath Sendix. So this structure is starting to fail. It's crumbling, and we'll talk about more of that in a second. Now that I've covered the ecology of the stream, let's talk about flooding and why we're dealing with the problems we are. So here's a view of Underwood Creek in a natural state way back in 1946. So you can see the stream had a long and winding channel, and it was surrounded by wetland. And this wetland acted like a giant sponge. It absorbed water during high flow events and let out water slowly during dry spells. If you look up to the north, you can see there's still a lot of farm fields and a lot of area where when it rained, the water would just percolate into the ground. So back in the 1800s, something called the Dousman Ditch was dug, on the west side of Pilgrim Parkway. But if you ever drive by and look to the west, you'll see what looks like a nice stream there. That's actually a canal. And it's not just one. There's a series of canals back behind there. They were dug in the 1880s by farmers to lower the water table to dry out the land for farming. But what that did is add more water to the water that's coming through Elm Grove. Here's a view in 1958. They didn't put the cover on yet, but they straightened out the water channel and they encased it in concrete. This drastically sped up the water. And as you can see, there's no place for water to be stored in the wetland. The wetland was all replaced by parking lots, roads, buildings, progress. So that was one issue. The second issue was back in 1967, they built something called Brookfield Square. Now think of all the rooftops and the parking lot, how much impermeable surface, and where's all that water going? You see this right here? It's coming across to the Dousman Ditch, and from the back this way. So all that water that's coming off of Brookfield Square is now coming through Elm Grove. Now all those millions and millions of gallons of water have to somehow fit through this cocktail straw. This thing was undersized when it was built. It couldn't handle a 100-year flood when it was built. So since the early 60s, there's been a lot of development all over Elm Grove, a lot of patios, a lot of large houses. All that water's got to go somewhere from the impermeable surfaces. So this is why we've had continual flooding downtown and why it keeps getting worse. As I said, the structure is failing, and because the DNR never issued a permit to put a cap on this, they won't let us repair it. If it fails, there's going to be flooding downtown and all kinds of preventable problems that we can address if we do go ahead with this project. So the village-wide flood control plan. This is actually pretty genius. One of the first things they did was enlarge the village pond. Those of us old timers remember the pond was much smaller. It was basically just the south end. Everything north of the Monet Bridge is new. It was deepened, and if you've ever walked around the pond on the pathway, you'll notice it's like 8 feet down from where you're standing. That's designed that way. There are pipes that connect it to Underwood Creek, so as Underwood Creek starts rising, the water tumbles into the pond, can fill up, and that'll store some water. I actually got a kind of a cool picture here. This is back in 2005. So what was done here, you can see the old pond had an island right here. That was dug out. Everything was deepened. The roadway, when you come into the park, if you look to your right, that road drops away about a foot. All that dirt was scraped off for more floodwater storage. All that dirt ended up going and becoming our sledding hill. Now also for us old timers, you might remember that this channel from the bridge to Juneau was a straight path with concrete raceways. That was torn out. A meandering natural channel that's larger was put in, so that holds floodwater. The next thing that was down at Legion Park. It used to be the home of the Legion, but the American Legion Post. Well, that building was taken out, the whole field was lowered, and if the water keeps rising and it gets to that point, it'll tumble over the banks where it's designed to tumble over, cross the field, and go into a 9-foot wide tunnel that bypasses downtown. Completely bypasses downtown and comes out behind the Public Works building and rejoins the stream. So that's step 2. Step 3 is always intended to be the daylighting of Underwood Creek. And step 4 is South Park down at the end here. That has also been engineered to retain floodwater. So why is this necessary? It's basically, one way to visualize it is a series of buckets. The first bucket fills up with floodwater, that overflows, the second bucket fills up, and the third bucket. And all these buckets are replacing the wetland that used to be there. So this is generally what the new stream might look like. It's going to meander along the railroad tracks. It'll have a walking path and other amenities that are yet to be determined. And we did receive a lot of grant money. We received $175,000 for engineering. That's what we used to design this. This is actually engineered. It's not just an artist's conception. This is engineered to this cross hatching here is a flood channel that's designed to hold flood water. The next grant you see here for property acquisition, we did use that to buy the 1 hour Martinizing building that has since been taken down. And we still have this $300,000 grant that's outstanding, and that has a sunset date, and we need to move so we can use this money and not lose it. So what we acquired, we did acquire the 1 hour Martinizing program, or property rather. We are in negotiations currently with the railroad to buy the old railroad spur that goes from basically where the public works yard is out to Blue Mound. The railroad, let's see how to phrase this, they're only accountable to Congress. So they're not intimidated by the village of Elm Grove. So they take their time getting back to us. So we've been in negotiations, they are responding to us, but we're in the process of getting this done. And they've come up with some possibly new requirements since we did the engineering in 2019. That may delay us, or has delayed us, in putting this out to referendum. We're not going to be able to make the April ballot because we don't have an accurate cost. And we can't put something on the ballot unless we can tell you with confidence what that cost will be. So the referendum on this will be either August or November, still to be determined. So this is a plan view of what the stream is going to look like, and it shows the engineering. If you can see these are engineered pools and riffles. This will make the water interact with the hyporheic zone, and these bends will slow down the water. And we want the stream to stay where we put it, because streams tend to erode on the outside of curves. So we're going to put something called tow wood on the outside of the curves. These will be underneath the bank. You won't see them. But what tow wood does, number one, it prevents erosion. Number two, algae grows on it, and it's food for small fish. Small fish are food for bigger fish. And the bigger fish have a place to hide when we have a high flow event, so they're not swept downstream. Here is a video of a salmon that was taken 2 years ago. The wall you see on the left is the 890 building. So salmon have come all the way up from Lake Michigan and gotten to the bottom of the culvert, but they will not go into that box culvert. When we get that removed, we're expecting that they will swim all the way up to Brookfield along with Northern Pike and spawn up there. How cool will that be? We're going to have salmon runs up and down Elm Grove. So what are we going to do with the old culvert? We're going to fill it in. We're going to have a small drainage pipe in the middle, and that's where the runoff will go, probably from the buildings, the parking shop, Sendix, and 890 building, so they don't have to spill their roof water onto the parking lot. So here's what it's going to look like. If I can show you, right, this area here is where the stream currently goes under the parking lot, goes under Sendix, and then comes out here. This area will be filled in and reclaimed. Could be used for parking lot. This area here is going to remain open for wildlife habitat and for extra floodwater storage. So you can see there's a lot more floodwater storage here than this little piece here. So, and this is important because we've gotten the other pieces in place, but we haven't had that big flood since we've had everything in place. So this is the missing link to make sure we can survive that 100 or the 300-year flood like we had in 97. Now, to pay for this, We are projecting to use stormwater funds that we'll be collecting as we go. And this is all part of tax incremental district number 2. So what that means is outside of this district, your property taxes are not projected to increase due to this project. This is a article that Drew Sternitsky sent me. It's September 2022, National Geographic, and it talks about what an economic boom the daylighting of their creek was in Yonkers, New York. Now, Yonkers is a larger city, about 200,000, but they had over $4 billion in economic growth due to that fact. And it's a worldwide movement. They're doing it all over the world. They realize it draws people, it draws money. Zurich, Switzerland, can you imagine what it costs to rip up downtown Zurich, Switzerland? And they're doing 13 miles of it. And I've never heard anyone accuse the Swiss of being bad with money. So healthy rivers benefit everyone. We get clean water, natural beauty, it helps wildlife, and it helps the economy. What we're expecting is this will now draw people to the downtown. Pretty much in the past, people pull up to the shop they want to go to, get out, run in, run back to your car and go. We want to create an environment where you can get out and walk around. The path that'll be alongside the river will connect with the village park, and from the village park you'll be able to walk or bicycle all the way down to the Hank Aaron Trail, and then you can get down to the Oak Leaf or out to the Glacial Drumlin Trail. It's really going to connect us and make it safe for people and kids to walk back and forth. So I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Milwaukee Riverkeeper. It's a great organization. I've been a member for years. The reason I became a member is they're not just a group that puts out position papers and files lawsuits. They partner with communities. They partnered with Elm Grove and helped us get the grants that we got. If not for them, we would be paying a lot more in tax dollars. It's an awesome organization. There's all kinds of things you can do. You can volunteer for them. They can have you go out and take water samples that are analyzed. They have a seniors network. They have a book club. They do boat tours. My wife Jean and I have done kayaking tours, which are guided. So if you'd like to get involved, just MilwaukeeRiverkeeper.org. And I have to talk about this. This is one of their programs. It's Adopt a River. It's kind of like Adopt a Highway. And my wife and I adopted the Underwood Creek part going through the village park. And at first it was just us because it was COVID. And then after a couple of years, more people started joining us. And last year we partnered with the Beautification Committee and had over 50 people join us. So we cleaned up the entire park as well as the creek. And if you'd like to join us, we're going to do it again on April 20th. So all are welcome. So that being said, what questions do you have? Yes?
John, you said you don't have a final budget number, but do you have a scientific crazy guess that you might throw out there?
$5 to $6 million, I think is a good guess.
And you mentioned there's a sunset on that $300,000 grant. What is the timing on that?
Well, it would have been at the end of 24, so we're asking for an extension, and we're fairly confident we're going to get it because they can see we're actually doing all these steps to get there. Yes, sir.
If all goes pretty much as planned, when can I go down to Sunix and catch a salmon?
Well, I don't know what the state regulations are going to be, so I don't know when you can catch one, but we're expecting we'll be putting shovels in the ground in early 25, and then it'll be about an 8-month build from when it starts. And because we're delaying this a little bit into 25, not really delaying it, but we have more time, we're looking for more grants. And the engineer that's working with us on this, Stantec, has a fairly good feeling that we might be able to get more grant money. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just wondering, it was just upstream of that. You know, there's Watertown Plank Road, right?
Correct.
And then there's some businesses, just how's that gonna work over there? Where's the creek go? I'm kind of, like, I know where you're uncovering it,
Yeah.
but how's it gonna go underneath Watertown Plank there?
Oh, it's gonna go under the same bridge it's going under now.
Okay,
But where that open culvert is in front of Zister's,
yeah,
it's gonna take a hard left from there. and
okay,
go-
that's where I got confused.
Yeah, yeah. It's gonna take a hard left and go right through where the 1 hour Martinizing used to be. And then it'll turn right and it will meander along the railroad
So,
tracks.
you know, see a traffic light there, I mean, I get what you mean, it's gonna really turn then, right?
Pardon?
It's really gonna turn then, I mean, it's not gonna be a gradual turn, correct?
Yeah, it's gonna be I could go back to that slide. if
If
you'd
you
like.
mind, I mean, okay.
Sure. So this is the current bridge right here.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's gonna come and then it's about a 45-degree turn.
okay, I see it, all right.
We can't do a 90-degree, that would be a big problem with erosion.
Okay.
Yes,
Since the current culvert is owned by the owner of the Sendix building, and he's liable for any collapse, how much is he contributing money-wise to this project?
well, that has yet to be determined. We're still in negotiations with them. We had an appraisal done on that property that we're asking for to incorporate in the project. So,
That has to be provided as a source in the referendum.
yeah, all that information will be provided when we have solid answers. But right now, it's still in the negotiation
So
phase.
you're not ready for a referendum. It wouldn't be ready in April.
No, that was one of the things that delayed us.
Can they claim to own the top of the culvert? Can you own the over and navigable waterway?
Well, they owned all the land that the stream went through. They owned the navigable waterway. That was, yeah, that's their property.
Can you in Wisconsin own that land under the waterway?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. You know what the definition of navigable is in Wisconsin?
It's pretty small,
You can float a log on it.
yeah.
If you can float a log on it, it's navigable. And they had to tweak that some years ago because they were starting to call drainage ditches in front of your house navigable. You could float a log one day a year. So,
I just didn't know if it's confirmed that you can actually own that, right? Because they basically sort of assumed it.
well, they bought it years ago. I mean, they owned both sides of the creek and the land underneath it. Yes.
Hey, John, I'm just, of course, I always think the worst case scenario, but is there gonna be some kind of interaction with Canadian Pacific in regards to any spill, what their response would be? Like, I don't know, like a more punching a fuel tank or?
That could never happen.
Do you mean like the railroad, a train going by having an accident? That would fall under federal law and state law.
Train derailment?
I mean, they're not gonna make an agreement with the village.
Or are they required to have a emergency cleanup plan on file?
They do. You'd have to ask Tom if they file anything with us. I wouldn't know that. Tom?
They do not.
They do not have to have anything on file with us. Like I said, they're not answerable to anybody but Congress.
What's the web address for seeing your visuals and maybe your speech to you? I see you recording it.
Oh,
It's gonna be on the Elm Grove Women's Club.
Yeah.
.org, and we have a YouTube, it won't be there now, but it'll be in.
So what is your, for the women's club thing?
EGWC.org,
EW?
EGWC.org. And then there's a little space that says YouTube, and that's where all this stuff is. You can watch our meetings there too.
Was there any
No, it's EGO.org.
issues with modernizing property?
ED.
No, G.
yeah, there was,
Elm
and there
Grove,
is, but we know fairly well what's there. There's been a lot of
Yep.
study over the years on what's there.
You said that the open area between Sendex and Wall Street was going to be covered over and that was going to be turned into their parking lot. What happens from Wall Street south? There will be no creek running through there past the Sunset Playhouse. What happens to that piece of land there?
You're talking about this here?
Yes.
Okay, that's gonna remain open, just the way it is now.
What's going to feed it?
The
Runoff
pipe,
from the Parking lot?
no, the filled-in pipe, the filled-in culvert is gonna have a pipe in it. And that's gonna take runoff from the roofs of the buildings. That's the way it's projected to go now. And that runoff will flush into the stream. It's not gonna be the stream. The stream itself is up to the top of the stream.
Okay.
They're just gonna flush water in there to help maintain the habitat, but it's not gonna be a flowing stream anymore.
How big is that pipe that's going to be in the culvert?
I'd have to go back and look. It's, I think, either a 12 or 16.
Oh, okay, that's-
No, not huge. Yes?
At what point on the southern end does the reconfigured creek bed realign with the existing bed?
Yeah, good question. It's right at the very right edge of the stream. So just a little bit, almost to where the end of the public works yard is.
Okay, before you get to where the daycare center is, it looks like, or just about there, I can see the parking lot at the bottom there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So with the legislation that is passed, that anything over $1 million needs to go to referendum, what's the game plan? Let's just say this wouldn't pass, because you're saying 5 to 6 million, would you
Mhm.
chop it up into smaller projects, or what, is it all?
No, we can't do that because that would be an end runner on the intent of the legislation. What, if it doesn't pass and the culvert collapses, then a judge could issue an emergency order that we have to do it. The problem with that is the cost is gonna skyrocket because we're not able to get, send out bids for the lowest bidder. We will do it on an emergency basis and we'd have to pay an extreme premium for that.
Is the area of Underwood Creek just north of Barton Plank concrete lined, or is that not?
Just to the north. Yeah, there is some concrete there. It's much shorter though. And they only have a couple bridges going over it. So that would be addressed if and when they do a project on that property.
The salmon would travel past that though, as is?
They will, yeah, according to people at Milwaukee River Keepers, the limnologists there. I'm not a fish expert, I'm getting my information from them. Yes, sir.
I guess along those lines, I mean, you guys talk about water testing, how does Underwood Creek compare to, let's say, Milwaukee with Menominee or Sheboygan?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, River Keepers puts out a report card for all and I had do you have a hard copy with you? Okay, you can go on MilwaukeeRiverKeeper.org and they'll have it on there.
Okay.
And it'll show you every river what the report card
But I
is.
mean, it's still, I mean, it's in good shape, basically.
No, it's about a C minus, but
Okay.
it's so much better than it used to
It's
be.
good shape for me in the metropolitan area.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes, ma'am.
I wonder if we could go back for just a minute and talk about the potential of if the referendum fails to this gentleman's question, and there were to be a collapse, will the village, in getting the information out for the community at large, when we think about this, will the village make an attempt to inform all of the citizens, if we don't move forward with this, this is the possible cost expenditure if the tunnel collapses? I don't think a lot of residents really understand that we have to do something. And if we continue to drag our feet, it's gonna end up costing more.
But the tunnel is owned by Sendix, that's what I said at the beginning. So technically, the village doesn't have any responsibility. Correct?
Well, we're gonna get all kinds of flooding and backing up of water, and that's gonna affect all the businesses down there. So then it's gonna become our problem when the flooding occurs.
That's the part of the story that I don't know that has been communicated as well. And I think that if we all understand that, it will help us all when it comes to referendum time.
Okay. Tom, why don't you join me up here? This is our village manager, and he might be able to answer your question a little more fully than I can.
Thank you very much. So if I understand correctly, the question is what happens if the referendum fails?
Well, if the referendum fails and there's a catastrophic failure of the concrete tunnel that now encases,
Sure.
what impact does that have on the village, and do we have a plan to get that information out to all the residents?
Yeah, I think, ultimately it remains to be seen what a failure even looks like, what constitutes a failure, and what scope and scale is that. Ultimately, we know through the memorandum of understanding that the village engaged in the Department of Natural Resources with, they will not permit repair or replacement of the box culvert. So it could be a small section that fails. Ultimately, would it be acceptable in the eyes of the DNR if the current property owner were just to remove the cap and then technically the box culvert is daylit? What does that then do for the downtown area? What implications does that have for the commerce of the grocery store and so on? As far as public outreach, public relations, communications, Trustee Schindler has done a great job putting on discussions such as this. We all know now that the referendum will not be on the ballot in April. So at best, we're looking at August or November. There's going to be a more concerted effort for public outreach. So if you have not yet signed up for the village newsletter, we have the QR code handouts on the back table there. We've been more active on Facebook, Instagram. So we're trying to get out more, trying to get the message out. There will be more creative ways to get that message out there as well. But did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yes.
So I apologize, my background is in science, not law. Yes, sir.
Could you go into the tax incremental district number 2, and which from what you said, it sounds like that's going to be a big source of the funding. My property taxes aren't going to go up, but where does the money from TID number 2 come from?
I'm gonna pass this to Tom.
So the money in the increment, as it's called, is generated from tax incremental district number 2, all comes from the existing properties located within the boundary of the district. Historically, TID 2, I'll call it, has underperformed, and there has not been a lot of increment that would be able to be utilized for projects and or redevelopments as it's traditionally done in TIF districts. The debt that the TID has been paying off is about to expire here in the very near future. Once that occurs, the debt obligation no longer exists. The increment that's been utilized to pay that will now become available for future projects. All TID districts in Wisconsin are required to have something called a project plan. If you are planning a project or anticipate redevelopment, that has to be included within the project plan. The village recently took action to amend the project plan for TID 2 to include this specific daylighting project. So now legally we're able to allocate those funds to the specific project. So with that TID amendment, we also acted to extend the life of the TID, which is legal statutorily, and we're trying to maximize as much of that increment as we can while the TID exists. Once it's gone, it's gone. So.
What's included in TID 2, is that, because the water main work, that was different. What was in 2, was that like some of the other redevelopment was done in that area? Capital was taken down and stuff like that?
It's a large district, actually. TID number 2 encompasses the majority of the downtown. It even extends as far south as Blue Mound Road. It kind of jogs along some of the properties there, but it's pretty large. It's hard to describe. But the majority of the downtown is within the district.
I was gonna ask, you might as well stay on this one, but is the referendum just for Elm Grove, or is it gonna be from a more surrounding area, because it covers more than Elm Grove, right? It's great, correct?
It's just an Elm Grove referendum.
All right.
Yep. All right. Yes. Yes, sir.
I'm from the Sunset Playhouse, and we are in the floodplain, sort of. Are they gonna redefine the floodplains? Because it looks like the assisted living facility is gonna be put, instead of having on one side, it's gonna be on their other side.
Yes.
Who gets to redraw that?
FEMA. FEMA will have to redraw that. So it's from a regulatory permitting standard process, we have to submit these plans to FEMA. And the existing firm maps, as it's called, the flood insurance rate maps that define where the floodplain actually exists, those may be adjusted based upon the new storage capacity that this project will afford. Yep.
As a hydrogeologist, I can tell you that's going to add more capacity to the east. So that should make it less likely to flood at the Sunset Playhouse or the Heritage.
If anybody's familiar with downtown, they know that for the park and shop area and that area, parking is at a premium. It would appear that there's gonna be a significant change to the parking and also a significant change to the ingress and egress from that property. Would it be possible for you to set up barricades to show that people will no longer be able to exit the property from the drive that's to the east of the creek, and that they're gonna all, if it works out, go through what is the ingress side right next to Zeester's and somehow flow through the traffic? So if you're gonna, I guess, egress from it, you're gonna have to go all over to Wall Street, then go to Elm Grove Road and come back around and make a big loop through the property. And
Yeah,
then-
that's-
and also,
that's-
If you look, there's quite a few semis that park there delivering during the day. I was looking to see on here where they would park without, affecting what is the flow of traffic through there. Now they're parking on the property at, where the, well, the post office is on the one end, but if they're servicing Zeester's and that end, they're parking where the, 1 hour Martinizing shop was, so they can unload from there. So, I guess I'd be interested to see how you're planning on handling all of that for the village now.
Yeah, great question. Village staff has been meeting with all the individual property owners as it relates to the future parking lot configuration. Excuse me, so the owner of the Sendix property is a principal at PLM. They have engineers on staff. They do a lot of parking lot renovations and reconfiguration of parking lot layouts. There's a conceptual layout that's available right now on the village website you can take a look at. So there's a preliminary design, and that's actually currently underway and being redesigned right now. All of the existing property owners have conceptually agreed to that layout with some minor tweaks that are currently being adjusted. And within that are truck turning radii, especially to verify that larger semi trucks will be able to back into the loading docks of Sendix. So staff met recently with Ted Balistreri of Sendix. Funny enough, the landowner of the Sendix property is also named Ted Balistreri, so we have to refer to them as Land Ted and Sendix Ted. But they're all, and again, just to preface this, the property owners are largely in support of this project, right? Because I think they understand the implications of what happens if we do not try to do something in the downtown as well. Related to the ingress and egress point, the Public Works Committee during the engineering and design phase of this spent considerable time discussing the ingress and egress point of Watertown Plank Road. The result ultimately was, and we have that specific plan sheet back available if anybody wants to take it. It demonstrates a 1 in and a 1 out on Watertown Plank Road. That can be adjusted. This is something where, if the plan moves forward as is, we can see how it works. If needed, we can adjust. It's about a 40-foot width as demonstrated on the engineering plans, which actually, believe it or not, does have the capability of accommodating a left out, a right out, and a one-way in. And that's the exact configuration if you look across the street on Grinder's property is currently designed. So in theory, it could work there. Is it appropriate for it to work there? That's the question. And I think that's something that will just have to be explored as we proceed. Yes, sir.
Excuse me. Do you have a diagram that would describe from the point on your right where that all flows into Blue Mound?
We do have the Waukesha County GIS. It's actually a public platform that anybody can access, and there's layers on there. You can turn on the water features, and it will show you where Underwood Creek kind of goes all the way to the county boundary. Yeah.
So that's going back, it's meeting up to the old channel. So it'll just follow the old channel after this part here.
Never having been back to the old channel, it's all mystery.
But I just meant that's not true.
Yeah.
will any work have to be done on the opposite side of Watertown Plank, next to Great Harvest? Will some work that's not on that screen there?
No, nothing in this project, this specific project has any work on the north side of Watertown Plank. Yes, sir.
So, to Rick's point, what are the current number of parking stalls down there now, and with the reconfiguration, with what you're saying, the business owners are in agreement with what is showing now? with that?
Yep, that's a great question. I don't have the number off the top of my head. I do believe that there's actually a loss of total parking spaces. There has to be. I mean, we're cutting into a large portion of the area to the east. The conceptual design, if you take a look at it, I mean, there's a plethora of new parking that will be available. The other thing to keep in mind here is that all three of these properties, you can't see the actual property boundaries overlaid here, but they have a cross parking access agreement, and that will continue even after this project. So the village has agreed with this project, once they come up with a new parking plan, we'll actually implement that for them as part of the project. So I think most people in here would agree the current configuration there is less than desirable. I mean, you kind of take your life in your own hands during certain times of the day, trying to get from point A to point B. So it'll be an improvement, but and it's going to be one of those things where we're going to have to adapt, during peak times and so on. But I don't have the numbers here.
Any other questions?
What kind of timeline are you talking about? Once they start, how long will it be? And will it all be done at the same time? Will you be building a creek and then knocking down the creek at the same time? And during this, how much of the Park and Shop and Senex parking lots will be cordoned off that parking won't be available? Basically, how much of a hassle is this gonna really be?
Well, in my opinion, it's gonna be a lot less than like closing down Watertown Plank Road. We're gonna have some areas of the parking lot. Most of the work is gonna be along the railroad tracks, as you can see here. So.
It really comes quite a bit forward. I mean, they just can't stop, like, this is where we're gonna stop working. Are they gonna fence stuff off? Are they gonna make it impossible to come through there?
Well, no, we're not gonna make it impossible. The businesses would, have something to say about that. But we are gonna have temporary easements where we're at times gonna need to encroach on some of the areas. But the total build time from start to finish is predicted to be about 8 months. 8 to 10.
And the parking lot will be finished at that point?
We don't control the parking lot, that's Balustrade.
Okay, so that's another project.
It'll be finished at the completion of the construction.
So,
And it'll be paid.
8 months and everything will be done.
8 to 10, yeah.
And then the parking lot will be done.
Yeah, they have a real interest in getting that done, just as much as we do, if not more.
Can you, with your finger, draw like what the flow of the parking lot is going to be?
Yeah, and it's still in design phase, I guess, ultimately, but it's the general same pattern. It's gonna come through, kind of midway through, it'll hook back up, you're gonna have to get through here, and it'll go back over. There'll be additional new parking on this side. The concept is that employee parking for Sundays will actually park to the southeast there. But to go back to your other question, you're asking how the phase will take place for construction. And it's interesting, it's kind of like turnkey construction where they will actually build the new channel alignment first, and the existing creek will continue to flow as is. Once the new creek is fully constructed and it's ready to go, they'll flip the switch, the new creek, the water will flow into the new creek, and then we'll abandon the old creek.
Okay,
So
so then it's like 2 projects, right? The
2
building-
phases of the same project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where will the construction setup be? They bring in all this equipment? I worked in shopping centers
Yep.
where
Yep.
they dump it all right in front, and it's like, too bad, so sad.
Yeah, a lot of the staging is gonna take place directly east of the Village Court building.
Where is that?
Village Court is the horseshoe-shaped building right down here with the court area kind of in the middle. It's just south of the Sendix rectangular square there, I guess we'll call it right
So
there.
where is
East is straight up. Yep, the open area. Right, so the village does have construction easements secured in that area. There will be a lot of staging going on there primarily. The parking lot will remain open to some degree during construction, and cars will be able to get in and out. You're not gonna have the same capacity for parking as you currently do, which is existing conditions. You know, ultimately, something has to give, you know. But
it is gonna be designed more efficient.
yes, yeah, it will be more efficient upon completion for sure. Yep.
What's the length of the project?
Linear feet, I don't know off the top of my head.
Half mile, quarter mile,
No.
2 miles?
About 1,000 feet.
About 1,000 feet.
So $5 million for 1,000 feet?
You could look at it that way. I don't know if it's 1,000 feet, but. Any other questions? Yes.
I think getting the traffic in on one driveway on the front is gonna be hard. Why can't we do a bridge up the other side so we can have it in and out?
It's a great question. This gentleman asked, why can't we not have a vehicular bridge that would lead to the other side? And I believe what you're referencing is the existing ingress and egress point on Watertown Plank Road. Right. So there was discussion about that at the Public Works Committee. It's debatable as to whether or not that's a safe point of ingress and egress as it's currently configured as well. The plans do demonstrate bridge abutments that would be constructed at the time of construction of the project, where potentially we could have a pedestrian bridge put in place there as well. That portion of land there, the little green postage stamp, the intention would be that could be a gathering place or some other feature of the project eventually, but is it best practice to have another vehicular bridge? That's something that could be studied, I think, but does that answer your question? No. Sorry, I don't have a great answer for you.
Yes, sir.
I think it's important to note that it's going to be an inconvenient construction process, and there are going to be compromises, but at the end of it, look what we get.
Thank you. I mean, I grew up here, and this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to really do something great for the downtown. This is gonna draw people. They're gonna walk around. They're gonna be patronizing the businesses. I think it's really gonna be helpful to our downtown. Yes, Scott.
As I understand it, you have mentioned that there were grants in the Stormwater Fund, and that the money was gonna be coming from a substantive portion of that from TID after it advances and moves out of its sort of debt payment. Money from that TID has to be used within the TID anyway, correct?
Correct.
Right, so that seems like a valuable project to apply that resource towards.
That's our feeling.
We also should take more advantage of the parking that we have behind, like Welke's, and that's like a village parking lot behind there that I don't think a lot of people know is available. And maybe if we had, as part of this, people were concerned about losing parking here, we could do some signage. It would mean walking across Watertown Plank, but we already have, walking stoplights, you know, making that cross, so that, I don't know how many parking spots are back there, but it's a nice place to park in the summer, there's lots of trees.
Question, after the project is completed and built, is there incremental maintenance costs associated with the project that we will take on as taxpayers? Or will that still come from the TID district?
That's a good question, yes. The village DPW will shoulder the burden of maintenance on this, and that there has been purposefully designed an access corridor, I guess we'll call it, on the very eastern edge here. On the very top, kind of on the other side of that retaining wall that's designed. The idea is that it would be very low maintenance based on the plant schedule that's already been selected. So think of around Village Pond, the plants that are growing around there, it might be a very similar type of mix. Kind of self-sustaining, self-sufficient, We'll come through, do the clearing, potentially burning, maybe not in this area, I don't know, but we do it around the pond. And it's just one of those required maintenance things, so.
So is that space around the creek gonna be green space with, it's all be natural, not like you go have a picnic by the creek or anything, it's gonna be, it looks like grass, but it's gonna be all natural, like around the pond now?
Similar, like a similar type of species mix, right?
There'll be some grass, like trees, like.
Right, there could be some grass as well, and it remains to be seen, you know, this portion again, right adjacent to Watertown Plank Road, and that's a great opportunity for some. Yes?
And a walking path. right?
And a walking path, right.
It might be a really hard thing to get to, but is there any way to estimate the property value increase this creates for those properties? And I don't mean that we get it, they get it, they're in favor of it because they know this is gonna dramatically increase their property value. Is there any way to put any numbers to that, like over 10 years, this could increase the value of these properties by X?
Right, that's a great question, that's certainly for the assessor, John, I don't know if you have a response to that.
Just based on what we've seen in other communities and other cities that have done it, it's been a huge boon. There hasn't been one that I'm aware of that has had a negative or a neutral impact. It's all been positive. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for coming tonight. We really